It's just under 100 days now until those elections that will decide who the next United States president will be. At the weekend, Kamala Harris. Now, she's kind of... It seems like she's the one to take on Donald Trump, although that's not been confirmed. But she has managed to raise over $200 million towards her campaign. It seems that the bottleneck, the cork that was in the bottle when Biden was bumbling through his speeches, has been released, and all that money has flowed in the direction of Kamala Harris. Because all the money that was raised already was on the Biden-Harris ticket, she gets to keep that too. So, there's enough money, it seems. But who is Kamala Harris? And who is going to be her running mate? And what is the world going to look like under a Kamala Harris presidency? Or under a Biden-Vance, under a Trump-Vance presidency? The man to answer that, I'm absolutely certain, is the fabulous Jamil Jaffer, who is in the studio with me. It's such a thrill when you come in. I love it.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Executive Director, I should say, at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. So, 99 days-ish to go until the election. What are you thinking?
Well, look, obviously this is going to be a close race no matter what happens, right? The polls have now started to move. Kamala Harris is showing stronger than Joe Biden did against Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup. It'll be close either way. It'll probably be within the margin of error of most polls coming up to Election Day. And so a lot of this will probably turn on turnout and who's able to motivate their base more to come out and then get that moderate middle ground voter. Will it be Donald Trump saying you're economically less well off today than you were under my administration? Will it be Kamala Harris saying Donald Trump is going to destroy democracy, stick with what you know? We had a hard time coming out of COVID, but we're succeeding now.
The thing is, what America doesn't know is a female president, and a black female president at that. Now, Kamala Harris has got a long way to go to convince voters, those voters that are the uneducated, the way that America breaks them down, that these white guys that are not college educated, are they going to vote for a black woman?
Well, I don't see any reason why not. I think the biggest challenge that Kamala Harris faces is defending the Biden administration's record in office and saying, I'm the right person for the job, right? I think that people have seen her own administration sort of, you know, when Joe Biden was thinking about coming out of the race, right? They weren't sure they wanted this vice president to be the nominee. Now, they appear to all solidified around her.
It seems like it.
Right. But that's got to raise some questions, right? Does she have the support of Democrats in her own party, much less that middle ground voter? And I think it'll be a challenge for Republicans like would be for any Democrat leader.
I was talking to a mate of mine, Bill Keeler, who works out of New York, and on this programme, and he was saying, look, against Trump, some people would vote for a cardboard box. Is that the situation we're in with Kamala, that it doesn't matter who she is or what she is, that people are just keen not to vote for Trump?
Well, I think there's certainly a part of the American electoral base, including some not insignificant amount of Republicans who never have voted for Donald Trump, never will vote for Donald Trump, and are looking for an alternative. Is Kamala Harris that alternative? Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that alternative? Is it somebody else? Is it just write in, or is it stay at home? Right, and that is the big question. And of those people who are not going to vote for Donald Trump, are they going to vote for her? Or are they just not going to come out? Putting aside Republicans, there are maybe Democrats as well who would never vote for Donald Trump, but who may not be prepared to vote for Kamala Harris. And that, I think, that question of who those people are and how many of them there are, that's an unknown for both parties.
It is an interesting thing that's happening to democracy at the moment. We've, as you know, just had our own elections here. We've now got a very powerful Labour government on about a third of the votes that were cast. 70% of this country did not want this government, but they have a vast majority and they are in. So a lot of people do stay at home because they say, what's the point? What's the point? 70% of people voted against Labour, but Labour get in. So there's a lot of people who are questioning now whether to bother getting out and ticking that box.
Well, and this is the challenge for democracies, right? When you have that happening in your electoral base, and that's been happening for years, in the American body politic, right? Why does it matter if I vote? Should I vote, right? You know, half the American voter base, the eligible voter base, wasn't historically, wasn't even you know, hadn't registered to vote. And then only half of them, putting aside presidential elections, used to turn out to vote. You've actually seen voter participation actually increase in the Trump era. So it's an interesting dynamic. You've got more voters today than you did before that, right? And you see more people voting for the base of their party, both Democrats and Republicans. So you're seeing more polarization in American politics, less cross-ticket voting, as far as we can tell. It's hard to know because we don't actually have we don't have the actual details, but it appears from the data that there's less cross-ticket voting than there used to be. And so the question then becomes, for those people who are in the middle and who don't see the benefit of a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump, because they are at the extremes of their parties, right? I think some people believe, right? Or a Kamala Harris and a Donald Trump, J.D. Vance and whomever Kamala Harris picks, right? What does that middle voter do? Do they sit at home? Do they cast a protest vote, right? Do they do something else? That's the unknown question that polls are having a really hard time assessing.
One of the humps that Kamala's got to get over is how much did she know about Joe Biden's condition? Because there is a sense that I've been reading, and I read a lot about this, that she was covering up for Biden's ill health. And if that is true, then we don't trust her.
Well, look, it does seem like the entire administration was covering up for his challenges, right?
But it's not the first time. Look at Reagan, look at Bush, look at all. I mean, that happens throughout history, right?
There's no doubt, but I think what you see here was, unlike those presidents who were at the end of a two-term presidency, you have a president who's coming into a second term and who seemed unwilling to recognize his own challenges, even after that disastrous debate performance. We saw him write this letter to members of Congress, very aggressive, and you could almost read the letter had been drafted by staff, then he had hand-edited it, right, and said, and the staff said, don't put those rhetorical questions in, that's not the right tone. This is my letter, it's going out. And, you know, when you get to that point, I mean, that's a real challenge. To me, when I read that letter looked to me like the dying gasp, not physically, right? And it turns out in the long run it was. Now, the challenge, of course, is the Democratic Party could have made that decision earlier on, right? It's not like they didn't know the challenges.
But Biden had to make that decision.
He had to make the decision. The Republican Party on the other side, they know what they're getting with Donald Trump. They saw 4 years in office. They saw what happened on January 6th, right? And yet, he was, you know, nominated by acclamation, right? Even Nikki Haley, who fought a good fight through the primaries, ultimately allocated her delegates to him, spoke at the convention after the attempt on his life, right? So, you know, it's not like these two parties are functioning towards the center. They're functioning to the extremes. The question then becomes, what happens again to that middle voter, that average American who says, look, I don't care about this noise in politics. I'm worried about my pocketbook.
Yeah.
I'm worried about gas prices. I'm worried about the price of eggs. I'm worried about making ends meet for my family. Because at the end of the day, that's, you know, Bill Clinton said it, right? It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just true. And I think if you're talking to the average American voter, right, they probably feel pretty challenged right now. And for better or for worse, whether it's Donald Trump's responsibility or Joe Biden's fault, they felt more economically successful in Donald Trump administration. That may augur for a Donald Trump victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely. I always say that politics, like charity, begins at home. It is all about ourselves. I mean, there's no greater good here, right? Looking at Donald Trump, though, he's had to pivot because he was the youngster in the race.
Which is crazy to say. When you say it out loud, you can't help but laugh, right? Because
he was the baby of the presidential race. He's now the old man of the presidential race. He's been saying stuff like Hannibal Lecter, good guy. I mean, you know, you've got to question
the movie villain, to be clear,
the movie villain,
right? Not a real person,
that ate people.
That guy
for a living. That guy. So you know, he's now. Whoa, it's now juxtaposed for him, isn't it? You've got Kamala Harris, who's a good deal younger, at nearly 60, and he's nearly 80. So he's had to pivot. But a lot of people as well have been saying that what Trump will do, and it looks like he's doing it, he will just overstep He will become so aggressive and really, you know, start to lose the African American vote or the Asian vote or the female vote, because he will attack her on the grounds. He'll be told not to, but he won't be able to help himself. That he will start to attack her on the grounds of being a woman, of being black, of being Asian, and he will start to lose those votes. Have you witnessed any of that?
Well, look, you know, I haven't seen it yet. And part of what's interesting is Donald Trump had the opportunity when Joe Biden had that challenging debate to really attack him and go after him hard. He was shockingly restrained for the Donald Trump candidate that we've seen.
He
was. He held himself back. You could almost see the pain.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to say something.
I think he was embarrassed as well for him.
He was. I think he was, and he held back. And so the question is, can he maintain that for the next 6 months? If he can, right, he may very well coast to victory.
I bet you a $5 now, and that's pounds, not dollars.
Yeah. Although they're closer now. They're closer than they've ever been.
Now. Let's just cast our eyes to a future where Trump and Vance win, right? Let's just say that they're going to win, right? What does that do for the world? Because they're both isolationists. They are both keen on, you know, socking it to the rest of us in the world. They're both keen on controlling China. I can't say China now without doing that. You know, they seem to be hand in hand with this vitriol and closing America down. And Vance said, I don't care what happens to Ukraine. Don't care. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly short-sighted, I may say. But what does a world look like with Trump and Vance in the White House?
Well, look, I think, you know, we have 4 years of a Trump administration policy to look back on and say, what did we think of that, right? And there were some wins and there were some challenges, right? The wins include the Abraham Accords, getting tough on China, right? Getting our NATO allies to contribute more to meet their commitments, right, to their 2% of GDP. Not all of them, but to get them closer to that. And then we saw crazy things, attempts to get Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear weapons as if that was going to happen, right? And, you know, we could see eye to eye, right? This idea that Vladimir Putin could be sated. A good guy, right? But by the way, he was the first person to say that, right? I mean, you remember, you know, President Bush said, I saw into his soul, right? President Obama, in an aside, said, just give me a little more time, right? So we've had multiple presidents sort of try and find the middle ground with Putin. And so this has been a real challenge. And so, you know, I think it's easy to label Donald Trump and J.D. Vance isolationists, and there was certainly an element to that, right? This view that we can give, you know, part of Ukraine to Russia and they'll stop with that. We've seen that story before.
It's not theirs to give.
It's not theirs to give, but we saw that in the Obama administration. It's not like we didn't do that with Crimea. They took Crimea.
But appeasement doesn't work. We've seen that with Iran. Appeasement doesn't work.
It doesn't work with Iran. It didn't work with Hitler. It won't work with Putin, right? It won't work with
Kim Jong-un. Just keep the list going.
And it won't work with President Xi, right? Yeah. But the problem is you have candidates on both sides of the aisle, right, who are not prepared to have America step into its traditional leadership role and lean forward and be assertive and back that assertiveness with action, right? You've seen now 12 years, going on 16 probably years of foreign policy in America where America has chosen not to lead, notwithstanding the desire of our allies to have some level of that, maybe not the obnoxious America first leadership, but some amount of American leadership. We haven't seen that since Obama. Not Biden, not Trump won.
There is no... The America used to be, the world's policeman, the world leader. I don't think the world looks at America in the same way.
And I don't think America wants to be the world's policeman, but America needs to lean forward and lead from the front, not from behind, and not lead at all. The problem is there's no candidate in this race who's asserting that measure. It's not Donald Trump, it's not J.D. Vance, it's not Kamala Harris, and it's not whoever Kamala Harris's vice president is going to be. So that's just the world we're walking into.
Just quickly, what happens if Kamala Harris wins? Will Trump accept it?
That's a very tough question. I think, one, it'll be depend on how close it is, and I think because it'll be close, I think it's likely to see a lot of challenges.
He's going to say it was stolen. Come on.
I think it's hard. It's going to be hard for him not to say it's stolen, right? Having done that the last time around and not having been true, right? What's the downside of doing it again?
Well, the downside is for America. Because you've got MAGAs with guns who are now ready for insurrection.
Right. Downside for the country, downside for democracy, downside for Donald Trump.
Yeah, good point. Always good points with you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamil Jaffer there, who's Executive Director at the National Security Institute, George Mason University in Washington, D.C., an incredibly wonderful friend to this programme. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Quick break, back in a sec.